The grand convocation hall of the Galactic Academy was designed to inspire awe in 1,000 different species, which meant it mostly just inspired headaches in me. Arches of living crystal pulsed with soft, internal light, soaring into a domed ceiling that was not a ceiling at all, but a transparent canopy, showcasing the swirling violet and gold of the Aurelian Nebula. Below, the new student body milled about, a chaotic symphony of biology. There were the Cathar, insectoids whose chitinous plates clicked softly on the marble floor. There were the ethereal Luminians, beings of coherent light, shimmering inside elegant containment suits. And then, there was me, Jax Hunter. The bipedal ape in a standard-issue uniform that was definitely not designed for primate shoulders. My personal AI, Nyx, chose that moment to chime in through the microscopic implant behind my ear. Her voice was a dry, synthesized monotone that I had personally programmed to sound perpetually unimpressed. Statistical analysis of the ambient energy fields indicates you are the least significant life form in this room, by a factor of 12,000. Congratulations on the new record. Thanks, Nyx. Just what I needed to hear. I subvocalized, my lips barely moving. I was getting good at that. It was one of the many tricks you had to learn when you were born without a neural link. Everyone else here was probably sharing entire encyclopedias worth of information in the silent, shimmering space between thoughts. I was stuck talking to myself like a crazy person. The dean of the academy, a towering crystalline entity named Praxis, was droning on from a floating podium. His voice was a series of harmonic chimes that a translator converted into flat, universal standard speech. He was talking about tradition, honor, and the great responsibility of representing our respective worlds. I tried to pay attention. I really did. But it was hard when you were the sole representative of a world considered the galactic equivalent of a mud puddle. Humanity had stumbled out into the cosmos a few centuries ago, late to the party and ridiculously underdressed. We were a curiosity, a biological anomaly. We still used our teeth for chewing. The very concept sent shivers of horrified fascination through most of the higher species. "Do you think they know I ate a bacon sandwich for breakfast?" I muttered to Nyx. "The Valcor delegation 3 rows ahead of you appears to be sensing your primitive digestive processes. The lead female's olfactory tendrils have recoiled by 6 millimeters. She likely finds the scent of cooked animal flesh barbaric." I glanced over at the Valcor. They were everything humanity was not tall, impossibly graceful, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with a faint silver light. They were one of the founding races of the Galactic Alliance, a species so ancient they had watched stars being born. They carried themselves with an effortless superiority that was probably justified. The female Nyx had mentioned, the one with the sensitive tendrils, was laughing with her companions. Her laugh was not a sound, but a cascade of shimmering light that played across her skin. It was beautiful, and it was aimed directly at me. I sighed, shifting my weight. My feet hurt. The artificial gravity on Aurelian Prime was about 10% stronger than Earth's, just enough to be a constant, nagging reminder that my body was not built for this place. I was the grand experiment, the token primate. The admissions board had apparently decided it was time to see if a human could handle a proper education, and I had been the unlucky sap with high enough test scores. My prize was a full scholarship and the unending status of being the class pet. The dean's speech finally wound down, ending in a crescendo of chimes that made my fillings ache. The formal ceremony was over. Now came the mingling, which for me meant finding an unoccupied corner and trying to look thoughtfully engaged with the nebula. No such luck. Before I could make my escape, the group of Valcor students glided over. Their movements were so fluid, they seemed to float rather than walk. The female who had been laughing was in the lead. She was even more intimidating up close. Her silver eyes scanned me from head to toe, A slow, deliberate appraisal that made me feel like a microbe under a microscope. "You are the human," she stated. It was not a question. Her voice was melodic, but with an edge of something that sounded a lot like pity. "Jax Hunter," I said, offering a hand out of sheer, stupid instinct. She stared at the offered appendage as if I had presented her with a dead fish. One of her male companions let out a soft, psionic chuckle that vibrated in the air around us. My face grew hot. Right. Handshakes. Another primitive custom. I awkwardly dropped my arm. "I am Zira," she said, her eyes still holding a spark of amusement. "We were just discussing the unique biological limitations of your species. No inherent energy field. No psionic potential. Your life signs are quiet. We prefer the term subtle," I quipped. My sarcasm was utterly lost on her. "Indeed," she said, her lips curving in a faint smile. "My colleague, Rorik," she gestured to the male who had laughed, "theorized that if you were to hold a focused energy conduit, your body would likely suffer catastrophic cellular decay." "A charming theory," I said, my own smile feeling tight and fake. "I will be sure not to try it." "It is this lack of an energy aura that makes you so fascinating," Zira continued, circling me slowly, like a predator sizing up strange, unappetizing prey. "Our histories speak of artifacts that can only be activated by a living energy field, relics of our ancestors. To you, they would be nothing more than inert metal." She paused, a new glint in her silver eyes. It was the look of someone who had just had a brilliant, terrible idea. "In fact," she said, her voice dropping conspiratorially, "I believe I have something that might illustrate the point." She gestured to another of her companions, a silent, hulking Valkor who had been standing in the back. The large male reached into a fold of his robes and produced something wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it with a theatrical flourish, revealing a sword. Or what had once been a sword. It was the most pathetic excuse for a weapon I had ever seen. The blade was a long, pitted piece of metal, mottled with patches of orange and brown rust. The crossguard was a simple, unadorned bar of the same decaying material, and the hilt was wrapped in what looked like fossilized leather straps. It looked like something you would find at the bottom of a swamp, not in the possession of a student at the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. "This," Zira announced with a grand sweep of her hand, "is a ceremonial blade from the dawn of my people. 10,000 years it has slumbered, waiting for the touch of a worthy Valkor to awaken the energies within." Her friends were all trying, and failing, to suppress their psionic giggles. The joke was now painfully obvious. "Here, human. Hold our sacred relic. Show everyone how empty and powerless you are." It was a high-tech, alien version of a schoolyard prank. "A great honor," I said, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "It is," she agreed, missing the irony completely. "Go on. Take it. A gift, to welcome you to the academy." She held it out to me, hilt first. The rusted metal seemed to absorb the light of the hall, looking dull and lifeless. I could feel dozens of eyes on me now. The word was spreading silently through the neural links. The primitives are being hazed. Come watch the fun. My pride, what little I had left, bristled. I could refuse. I could walk away and let them have their laugh. But something inside me, some stubborn, stupidly human part of me, refused to give them the satisfaction. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. "You know," I said, reaching for the hilt. "Back on Earth, we have a saying, never look a gift horse in the mouth." "We do not have horses," Zira replied, genuinely confused. "It means thanks for the junk," I said, and my fingers closed around the rough, crumbling grip. The moment my skin made contact, 3 things happened at once. First, a hum. It was not a sound I heard with my ears. but a deep, resonant vibration that shot up my arm and seemed to settle directly in my bones. It felt ancient, like the echo of a forgotten song. Second, the rust vanished. Not flaked off, but simply ceased to exist. One moment the blade was a mottled orange-brown. The next, it was a smooth, gunmetal gray, the color of a storm cloud. The pitted surface smoothed out, the metal flowing like liquid for a split second, before solidifying into a flawless, unblemished surface. The leather on the hilt became supple and dark. Third, the light. A soft blue glow began to emanate from the crossguard, pulsing in time with my own heartbeat. It was faint at first, a shy whisper of luminescence. Then, as my grip tightened, the light surged. It flowed up the blade, a brilliant, electric blue that chased away the shadows and painted the astonished faces of the Valkor in its ethereal glow. The light was not harsh or cold. It was warm, alive. It felt less like technology and more like a captured star. The entire convocation hall had gone silent. The gentle clicking of the Cathar, the shimmering hum of the Luminians, the psionic chatter of 1,000 minds, all of it ceased. The only sound was the faint, thrumming hum of the sword in my hand. It felt right. It was not heavy, not awkward. It felt like a part of my own arm, an extension of my own will. I stared at the glowing blade, my mind a complete and utter blank. This was not supposed to happen. I was the energy null human, the biological dead end. My cells were not supposed to be capable of this. Nyx's voice in my ear was, for the first time since I had activated her, audibly strained. Jax, the artifact is emitting a coherent energy field that is impossible. It is interfacing directly with your biosignature. My sensor readings are corrupted. This should not be happening. You think, I breathed, unable to tear my eyes from the impossible light. I looked up at Zira. Her superior amusement had been replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her beautiful obsidian face was pale, her silver eyes wide with disbelief. The joke had gone spectacularly, apocalyptically wrong. She stared at the sword, then at my face, then back at the sword. Her mouth opened and closed silently, no melodic words coming out. Rorik, the one who had chuckled at me, took an involuntary step back, his hand instinctively going to the ceremonial energy pistol at his hip. "It is the relic of origin," another Valkor whispered, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on fear. "It lives again." The name sent a ripple of recognition through the assembled crowd. Murmurs started to spread, no longer silent and psionic but audible, spoken in a dozen different languages. The relic of origin. I had no idea what that meant, but judging by the looks on their faces, it was something far more significant than a rusty piece of swamp junk. Dean Praxis floated down from his podium, his crystalline form radiating waves of alarm. "Student Hunter," his translated voice boomed, cutting through the rising noise. "Release the artifact, immediately." I looked from the Dean to the glowing sword in my hand. It pulsed gently, a steady, reassuring rhythm. It felt like it belonged there. Releasing it felt like the last thing in the universe I wanted to do. My grip, if anything, tightened. The light on the blade flared in response, casting my shadow long and sharp across the marble floor. Zira finally found her voice. "How?" she whispered, her gaze locked on me. "How are you doing that? You are human." She said it like an accusation, as if I had somehow cheated at the fundamental laws of biology. "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I managed a weak, shaky smile. "Joke's on the galaxy, I guess." The news did not just spread through the academy. It detonated. Within minutes, every display screen on Aurelian Prime was showing a looped security recording of the moment the primitive human, the condescending alien, and the 10,000-year-old sword bursting into impossible life. My anonymity was gone. My quiet little corner of the universe had just been vaporized. I was no longer Jax Hunter, the experimental human student. I was the boy who woke the sleeping relic. And as the Academy security forces began to advance, their energy rifles leveled not at the terrified Valkor, but squarely at me. I had a sinking feeling that my life had just become infinitely more complicated and significantly shorter. The prank was over, but the trouble, I was beginning to realize, was just getting started. The energy rifles of the Academy security force hummed with a low, menacing thrum, a sound designed to end arguments before they began. There were 6 guards, all members of the bulky, 4 armed species known as the Goliaths, and every single one of their 24 eyes was fixed on me. Their expressions were unreadable, but the way their primary hands tightened on their triggers spoke a universal language. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The brilliant blue sword felt impossibly real in my hand, its light a beacon in the suddenly hostile hall. It was the only warm thing in a room that had become very, very cold. "I will not ask again. Student Hunter," Dean Praxis chimed, his crystalline form drifting closer. The harmonic tones of his voice were sharp, cutting. "You are in possession of an artifact of immense cultural and historical significance to the Valkor people. You will relinquish it to the Academy for safekeeping." Relinquish it. The words echoed in my head. Just hand it over. Go back to being the invisible human. The class joke. It was the smart thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. My entire life I had been told to be smart and safe, to know my place. I grew up in the orbital habitats above Earth, in the shadow of the great alien ships that visited our system. We were the newcomers, the galactic children told to be seen and not heard. I had gotten into this academy through grueling work, by being smarter, faster, and more adaptable than anyone thought a human could be. And for what? To be the punchline of a joke. This glowing sword was the punchline that had punched back. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it seemed to ricochet off the silent walls of the convocation hall. Dean Praxis stopped his advance. A low murmur went through the assembled students. "What did you say?" the dean's translator asked, the flat tone somehow conveying complete astonishment. "I said no," I repeated, my voice a little stronger this time. I raised the sword slightly, its blue light flaring. The Goliath guards tensed, their rifles whining as they powered up to a higher setting. "It was a gift." I glanced at Zira, whose face was a portrait of horrified confusion. "She gave it to me." "It was a jest." A new voice sliced through the tension. It was deep, resonant, and dripping with contempt. An elderly Valkor, clad in the ornate robes of a high official, pushed his way through the stunned students. He was taller than Zira, his obsidian skin etched with fine lines of age, and his silver eyes burned with a cold fire. This was a being who commanded respect and probably vaporized those who failed to provide it. A foolish, childish jest that has resulted in blasphemy. He came to a stop before me, his gaze dismissing me as utterly insignificant before falling upon the sword. A flicker of something awe, greed, reverence passed through his eyes before they hardened again. "I am Archduke Serath of the Valkor High Council, and a presiding member of this Academy's board," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "That which you hold is the blade of Kalar, the relic of origin. It is the soul of our greatest hero, a symbol of our purest lineage. It is not a toy to be ignited by a creature of mud and impulse." "Creature of mud and impulse," I repeated under my breath. "Nix. Add that to my list of potential autobiography titles." "Noted," her voice replied calmly in my ear. "Current analysis of Archduke Serath's biosignatures indicates extreme agitation and a 93% probability he is contemplating your immediate and violent disassembly. Good to know, I muttered. You will give me the blade, human, Sarath commanded, extending a long, elegant hand. Do so now, and the council may show leniency for your part in this desecration. I looked at his outstretched hand, then back at the sword. The light seemed to pulse in time with my own defiant heartbeat. It had chosen me. For whatever reason, this ancient piece of alien history had responded to me. The kid from the Earth orbital station who was told his species was an evolutionary dead end. Giving it up felt like admitting he was right. It felt like betraying the one moment in my life I had not felt small. I do not think so, I said, my grip on the hilt turning my knuckles white. It seems to be working just fine where it is. Sarath's eyes narrowed into silver slits. So be it. Guards, disarm him. Use non-lethal force, but retrieve the relic at any cost. The Goliaths raised their rifles. The world seemed to slow down. I could see the energy building in the barrels of their weapons, a sickly yellow glow. I had no weapon, no defense. Except for a magical sword I had no idea how to use. I braced myself for the impact, for the searing pain of a stun blast that could knock out a creature 10 times my size. But before they could fire, Zira moved. She glided between me and the guards, her arms spread wide. "Stop!" she cried, her voice trembling but firm. "Do not fire. You might damage the blade." Sarath looked at her, his expression a mask of cold fury. "Step aside, Zira. This does not concern you." "It was my folly that caused this," she insisted, her gaze flicking between the Archduke and me. She looked at me not with amusement anymore, but with a maddening, terrified confusion. We do not know how he activated it. Firing on him could extinguish the flame forever. 10,000 years it has been dark. Archduke, are you willing to be the one who plunges it back into slumber? Her words struck a chord. The Archduke hesitated, his jaw tightening. The cultural significance of the sword, it seemed, was the only thing keeping me from being turned into a pile of stunned, smoking meat. He looked from the glowing blade to my defiant face, and a new, more calculating expression replaced his anger. "You are correct," he said slowly. "A public spectacle is beneath this institution. Dean Praxis, escort the human to the council chambers, and bring the girl. She has much to answer for." He turned his back on me, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. "The Academy Council will convene an emergency session. We will resolve this contamination." The walk to the council chambers was the longest of my life. 2 Goliath guards marched in front of me, 2 behind. Dean Praxis floated silently beside me, his crystalline body radiating disapproval. Zira walked on my other side, pointedly not looking at me. She kept stealing glances at the sword, which had now dimmed to a soft, gentle pulse, as if it were breathing in my hand. My own mind was racing. I had gone from being a nobody to being a blasphemer and a political crisis in the span of about 10 minutes. It had to be a new record. "Nix, what are my chances here?" I subvocalized. "If by here you mean surviving the next hour, my projections are not optimistic," she replied. "The Archduke has already sent 3 encrypted messages to the Valkor homeworld. The word abomination was used in all of them. He is not your advocate." Shocker. The council chambers were even more intimidating than the convocation hall. It was a vast, circular room with no discernible floor or ceiling. Just an endless expanse of star-dusted darkness. Floating in the center was a large, circular platform, and orbiting it were smaller platforms for each of the council members. There were beings there I could not even properly identify. A silicon-based life form that looked like a moving mountain of geodes. A gas-based entity swirling inside a complex magnetic containment field. And, on the most ornate platform, sat Archduke Sarath, looking down at me like a king judging a worm. They placed me in the center of the main platform. Zira was guided to a smaller, ancillary platform reserved for witnesses. The sword in my hand still glowed softly, a single blue star in the oppressive darkness of the chamber. "The session is called to order," Dean Praxis announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. "We are here to address the unprecedented activation of the Valkor artifact, known as the Relic of Origin by the human exchange student, Jax Hunter." Sarath leaned forward, his voice cold and precise. "There is nothing to address. The object is a holy relic of my people. The human is a primitive, an energy null species barely capable of sentient thought. He has somehow defiled it. The blade must be removed from his possession, purified, and he must be punished for his transgression. I propose immediate expulsion and forfeiture of the artifact." A being made of what looked like shimmering liquid spoke up, its voice a series of bubbling pops and whistles that the translator turned into smooth, inquisitive prose. "With respect, Archduke, the question is not what has happened, but how. Our records are clear. The relic can only be awakened by a living energy field of immense power and purity. The human species has no such field. This event contradicts fundamental laws of bioenergetics. I propose we study the human, analyze his interaction with the artifact."
"Study him," Sarath scoffed. "He is an anomaly, a glitch in the fabric of reality. You do not study a disease. You quarantine it. The blade has been dormant for millennia, ever since the last true hero of the Valkor fell. For it to awaken in the hands of this thing is an insult to our entire history."
He turned his burning gaze to Zira. "You, tell the council why you gave a sacred relic to a lesser species as a plaything." Zira flinched, but stood tall. "It was an error in judgment, Archduke. The blade was from the archives, listed as inert and dormant. It has been presented to 1,000 students over the centuries as a historical curiosity. None have ever elicited a response. We believed it to be nothing more than a historical symbol. My intention was to demonstrate the unique nature of Valkor technology to our new human colleague. It was a misguided pedagogical exercise." "You used the soul of our people for a joke," Sarath corrected her icily. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at me then, her eyes full of a dawning horror and confusion. "I do not understand what happened. He just touched it." All eyes, or their equivalent sensory organs, turned back to me. "Jax Hunter," the liquid being bubbled. "Explain yourself. What did you do to activate the blade?"
I looked down at the sword in my hand. Its light was soft and steady. I had no idea what I had done. I was just a guy who was tired of being looked down on. "I accepted a gift," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I did not do anything. It did this on its own."
"Impossible," Sarath boomed. "The blade is a conduit. It amplifies the wielder's inner power. You have no inner power. You are a biological void." "Maybe your scanners are wrong," I shot back, emboldened by the warm weight of the sword in my hand. "Maybe you have all been so busy measuring your energy auras, you forgot to measure other things." "Such as," Sarath sneered. "I do not know," I admitted, frustration creeping into my voice. "Guts, willpower sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness back on Earth. We do not have psionic links or energy fields. When we want something done, we cannot just will it into happening. We have to build it, fight for it, and sometimes die for it. Maybe this sword feels that. Maybe it is tired of waiting for someone with the right energy signature and just wants someone who is willing to pick it up and hold on." My little speech was met with complete silence. I had probably just spouted the most ridiculous, anthropocentric nonsense they had ever heard. I was applying human concepts of will and determination to a piece of alien technology that likely operated on principles I could not even comprehend. His species' arrogance is as primitive as his biology, Serath declared to the council. He offers baseless emotional conjecture as a substitute for science. This is no longer a debate. He is clearly unfit. I demand a vote. All in favor of confiscating the relic and expelling the human. Several lights on the orbiting platforms blinked in affirmation. Not all of them, but enough. My stomach sank. And how exactly do you plan on confiscating it? I asked, raising the sword again. The blue light intensified, mirroring my agitation. The last time your guards tried, Zira here pointed out you might break your favorite toy. Are you willing to take that risk? Serath smiled. A cold, predatory expression. A clever observation for a primitive. No. We will not risk damaging the relic. You will hand it over, or you will be placed in indefinite confinement until you do. You will not eat. You will not sleep. You will not see the light of another star until the blade of Kalar is out of your unworthy hands. It was a checkmate. I could not fight the entire academy. Sooner or later, I would collapse from exhaustion, and they would take the sword from my unconscious fingers. But as I looked at Serath's smug, triumphant face, a lifetime of being underestimated welled up inside me. I thought of my parents, how hard they worked on the grimy engineering decks of Orbital Station 3 just to give me a chance at something better. I thought of the instructors who told me a human could never compete. I thought of Zira and her friends, their silent laughter echoing in my memory. Refusing was insane. It was suicide. But surrendering felt worse. Fine, I said. I guess I am moving in. The council was dismissed. My verdict was confinement to my assigned quarters, which were to be retrofitted with a level 9 containment field. I was officially a prisoner. As 2 new guards escorted me out, Zira watched me go, her expression unreadable. She was the one who started this. But I could see in her eyes that this chaotic outcome was the last thing she had ever intended. She had wanted to teach the monkey a lesson, not hand it a holy hand grenade. My quarters were a sterile, white box, typical for first-year students. The only difference now was the shimmering, transparent energy wall that had been erected just inside the doorway. I was alone, save for the pulsing blue sword which I had laid on my small desk. Well, that went well, I said to the empty room. By all metrics, that was a catastrophic failure of diplomacy. Nix's voice commented in my ear. You have successfully alienated the most powerful political body in the Academy, confirmed their belief that humans are irrational and arrogant, and gotten yourself imprisoned. Your score on the fitting and scale is now in the negative. Yeah, but I still have the sword, I said, running a finger along the smooth, cool metal of the blade. It hummed softly at my touch. A decorative but functionally useless asset, given your current situation, she pointed out. We will see about that. I sat on my bed, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I was trapped. Serath had won. It was only a matter of time. Miles away, in a private, shielded chamber, deep within the Valkor embassy, on Aurelian Prime, Archduke Serath met with 2 of his most trusted aides. They were both imposing figures, veterans of political and military campaigns. Their loyalty to the purity of the Valkor line absolute. The council is weak, Serath said, his voice a low growl. They are content to wait, to study the abomination. They would see our most sacred symbol defiled by the touch of a primate for months, all in the name of scientific curiosity. The human is stubborn. One of the aides, a male named Vorlag, noted. His species is known for it. They call it resilience. I call it mindless obstinance. He will not surrender the blade willingly. I know, Serath said, turning to look out a viewport at the swirling nebula. Which is why we cannot rely on the Council's ponderous, toothless methods. This situation requires a more direct solution. You are not suggesting, the second aide, A female named Kira began.
I am... Sarath interrupted, his silver eyes reflecting the distant starlight. The human is a contamination. The blade must be cleansed. If the creature will not release it, then it must be released from him. Permanently.
Vorlag nodded slowly. An accident could be arranged. A sudden malfunction in his quarter's life support system. A containment field overload? Regrettable, but necessary to neutralize a threat to Academy security.
Precisely, Sarath agreed. He is an unknown variable. He has done the impossible. We do not know what else he, or the blade in his hands, is capable of. We will not allow a creature of mud and filth to hold the destiny of the Valkor in its hands. Prepare the operation. Make it look seamless. By morning, the human problem will be solved, and the relic of origin will be back where it belongs.
His aides bowed in unison. The order had been given. The fate of the last human in the Galactic Academy had just been sealed. And I, sitting alone in my cell with a glowing blue sword, had no idea that the real danger was no longer the political maneuvering of a council, but the silent, deliberate planning of an execution. The first few hours of my imprisonment were a masterclass in boredom. My room was designed for quiet contemplation and study, which meant it had all the thrilling amenities of a high-tech sensory deprivation tank. I paced. I sat on the bed. I tried to talk to the food synthesizer, but it only offered me nutrient paste in 3 equally unappetizing flavors. The sword lay on my desk, its blue glow a silent, beautiful rebuke to the sterile white walls. It was my trophy and my curse. The coolest thing I would ever own, and the reason I was going to die of old age, in a 12 by 12-foot box. I picked it up for the 100th time. The hum was still there, a low thrum that vibrated through my hand and up my arm. It felt comforting, familiar. So, I said to the blade, what is your story? Use some kind of ancient alien superweapon, a fancy key, the galaxy's most overqualified letter opener. The sword, predictably, did not answer. His attempts to communicate with the inanimate object have reached a new level of desperation. Nyx's voice stated flatly in my ear. Perhaps you should try asking the nutrient synthesizer for its opinion next. Its processing power is marginally higher. I am just trying to understand it. Nyx, I sighed. Setting the sword back down, I focused on it, trying to will it to do something. Anything. I tried to feel for an energy field. I concentrated until my eyes watered. Nothing happened. The light remained a soft, steady pulse. Sarath said it amplifies the wielder's inner power, but I have got nothing. I am a biological blank. So why did you turn on for me? A faint hiss broke the silence of the room. I thought it was the ventilation system at first, a normal part of the Academy's life support, but it grew louder, more insistent. A small warning light above the door, one I had never noticed before, began to flash a soft yellow. Nyx, what is that? There was a half-second pause. That is the atmospheric composition alert, she said, her synthesized voice unnervingly calm. The oxygen content in this room is currently decreasing at a rate of 2% per minute. The nitrogen levels are rising to compensate. I stood up, my heart starting to pound. What why? At the current rate, the atmosphere will become insufficient to support your respiratory functions in approximately 16 minutes. That is not an answer, I snapped, walking over to the shimmering containment field. Security. There is something wrong with my life support, I yelled, my voice sounding thin and weak. My analysis indicates the external atmospheric controls for your quarter have been deliberately and remotely overridden. Nyx continued, her tone unchanging. The system is being flooded with inert nitrogen gas. This is not a malfunction, Jax. It is a targeted assassination. The words hit me like a physical blow. Assassination. Serath. He was not going to wait for me to starve. He was just going to turn off the air. It was so simple, so clean. The primitive human had a tragic life support accident. A deep, primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my defiance. I was going to suffocate. I was going to die in this white box, thousands of light years from home, because of a stupid joke. I banged on the containment field with my fists. "Help! Somebody help me!" My shouts were swallowed by the sound-dampening properties of the field. No one could hear me. The air was already getting thin, each breath feeling less satisfying than the last. My lungs were starting to burn. A wave of dizziness washed over me. 13 minutes remaining, Nix stated clinically. Rage. Hot and pure. Replace the fear. I was not a contamination. I was not a glitch. I was a human being, and I was not going to die on my knees, gasping for air while some arrogant fossil in a robe signed my death warrant. I was going to fight. I spun around, my eyes landing on the sword. Its blue light seemed to call to me. I stumbled to the desk and snatched it up. The metal was warm in my hand. "No," I gasped, the words tearing at my throat. "I will not let you win." I poured all my anger, all my fear, all my stubborn, stupid refusal to give up, into my grip. I thought of my parents, of the promise I made them that I would make humanity proud. I thought of Serath's sneering face and the council's dismissal. I put every ounce of my will, my very desire to exist, into the sword. I did not try to find some mythical energy field. I just held on, as if my life depended on it, because it did. The sword responded. The gentle blue pulse exploded into a blinding torrent of white-hot light. The low hum became a deafening roar, a sound of pure, unrestrained power that shook the very foundations of the room. A wave of kinetic force erupted from the blade, not an energy beam, but a physical shock wave. It slammed into the containment field with the force of a battering ram. The shimmering energy wall wavered, distorted, and then shattered with a sound like 1,000 panes of glass breaking at once. The shockwave continued, hitting the metal door behind it. The locks blew out with a shower of sparks, and the door was torn from its hinges, flying out into the corridor with a deafening crash. The sudden influx of breathable air from the hallway was the most wonderful thing I had ever felt. I fell to my knees, dragging in deep, ragged gulps of oxygen, my head spinning. The sword in my hand dimmed, returning to its soft blue glow, its hum once again a gentle whisper. It felt strangely light, as if it had expended some immense energy. "Well," I coughed, a grin spreading across my face. "That is one way to open a door." "Extraordinary," Nix murmured in my ear, a hint of something that might have been awe in her voice. The artifact released a focused kinetic burst equivalent to a small explosive charge. The energy signature was unlike anything in my database. It did not originate from the sword's internal power source. It originated from you. Before I could process that, footsteps echoed down the corridor. I scrambled to my feet, raising the sword, expecting to see a squad of Goliath guards. But it was not security. It was Zira. She stood frozen at the end of the hall, staring at the smoking, ruined doorway. Then at me, standing in the wreckage with a glowing sword in my hand. Her obsidian face was pale with shock. She was holding a small data slate, as if she had been coming to my room for a formal visit. "What? What did you do?" she stammered, her silver eyes wide. "I, redecorated," I gasped, still trying to catch my breath. "My life support malfunctioned, violently." Her eyes flickered to the flashing warning light inside my room, then to the scorch marks on the ceiling. Her expression shifted from shock to a horrified understanding. She took a step forward, her tendrils retracting in alarm. "Malfunctioned. That is a sealed maglock door. It would take a demolition charge to... Her voice trailed off as the realization dawned. This was not an accident.
Top of the class, I said, leaning against the ruined doorframe for support.
Now, if you will excuse me, I am breaking out. You can either help me, or you can get out of my way. But I am not going back in that box. Alarms began to blare throughout the student habitat. A shrill, pulsing wail. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in a hellish glow. Zira was trapped. If she stayed, she would be found with me, the escaped prisoner who had just destroyed Academy property. She was an accomplice. Her mind seemed to be working furiously, her initial shock giving way to a calculated assessment of her terrible new reality. She had two options: raise the alarm and seal her fate as my enemy, or throw her lot in with the primitive who had turned her life upside down.
"Where can we go?" she asked, her voice low and tense. "Security will have this entire level locked down in seconds." Her choice was made. A strange sense of relief washed over me. I was not alone anymore.
"Nix, find us a way out of here," I commanded. "Avoid main corridors. I want service tunnels, maintenance shafts, anything the security patrols ignore." "Processing," Nix replied. "There is a network of old hydro-servicing conduits, 2 levels below your current position. They are not on the main security schematics. Access can be gained through a janitorial closet at the end of this corridor." "Lead the way," I said to Zira. We ran. The alarms wailed behind us as we sprinted down the hallway. A bizarre duo of a human with a glowing sword and a Valcor student who looked like she was regretting every decision she had ever made. We found the closet, and Zira, with a few deft commands on a wall panel, managed to override the lock. Inside, a grimy access hatch led down into darkness. "You first," she said, her usual aristocratic grace completely gone, replaced by the frantic energy of a fugitive. The conduits were a maze of pipes and grimy metal walkways. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and recycled water. It was a side of the pristine, perfect academy that students were never meant to see. "So, what changed your mind?" I asked, panting as we navigated a narrow catwalk. "Why come to my cell?"
"I was not sure," she admitted, her voice echoing in the enclosed space. "I felt responsible. My joke put you in that room. I could not reconcile that with the Archduke's actions. He was too eager, too vicious. I accessed the restricted archives on the relic. There was nothing in 10,000 years of records to suggest it could be awakened by force or coercion. But there were footnotes, old philosophical texts that spoke of it responding to conviction, to a strength of spirit." She glanced at the sword in my hand. "I came to ask you what you felt when you touched it. I did not expect to find you in the middle of an assassination attempt."
"Conviction, huh?" I mused. "I guess I really do not want to suffocate counts." We moved in silence for a while. The only sounds our footsteps and the distant hum of the Academy's massive engines. We needed a plan. We needed a place to hide, somewhere Sarath and his security forces could not reach us.
"We need help," Zira said finally. "Someone who understands what is happening. Someone who operates outside the Council's influence."
"Does such a person even exist in this place?" I asked.
"There is one," she said hesitantly. "Professor Kale. He teaches xenobiology and ancient technologies. He is eccentric. Most of the faculty consider him a radical. He believes the Alliance's reliance on pure energy metrics to define intelligence is a fatal flaw. He has tenure, and his research is funded by some off-world consortium, so the Council tolerates him. They cannot control him." "A crazy professor who hates the Council," I said.
"He sounds perfect. Where do we find him?" Professor Kale's laboratory was not a laboratory. It was a jungle. We emerged from a service hatch into a vast, humid biodome filled with the most bizarre collection of alien flora I had ever seen. There were pulsating fungi that cast a soft purple glow, vines with crystalline thorns, and flowers that tracked our movement with unsettlingly intelligent-looking pistils. The air was thick with the scent of alien soil and chlorophyll. In the center of the chaos was a man. He was human, or at least he looked more human than anything else I had seen today. He was old, with a wild mane of white hair that seemed to defy gravity, and eyes that sparkled with a manic energy. He was wearing a ridiculously stained lab coat over a brightly colored floral shirt, and he was currently trying to coax a small, furry creature with far too many legs down from a tree, with a piece of what looked like dried fruit. "Come now, Ferdinand," the old man cooed. "It is infused with premium nutrients. Much better for your third and fourth stomachs than chewing on my data cables." He saw us, and did not seem the least bit surprised to find two fugitives climbing out of his floor. "Ah," he said, his bright eyes flicking from me to Zira, then settling on the glowing sword in my hand. "The human anomaly and the contrite Valkor. I was wondering when you two would drop in. Literally, in your case. Do close that hatch. Would you? The draft is upsetting the flora." This was Professor Kale. "You know who we are?" Zira asked, stunned. "My dear girl, the entire academy knows who you are." Kale chuckled, finally luring the creature down from the tree. "The boy who made a 10,000-year-old paperweight light up is the most interesting thing to happen here since the last supernova. I have been following your case with great interest." He popped the piece of fruit into his own mouth and chewed thoughtfully. A bit chalky." "Professor, we need your help," I said, stepping forward. "They tried to kill me." "Of course, they did," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Power does not like puzzles. It cannot solve. And you, my boy, are a walking, talking paradox that spits in the face of their most cherished beliefs. Sarath and his ilk believe that advancement is a straight line, that newer is always better. They have forgotten the old paths, the messy, emotional, illogical paths." He gestured for us to follow him, leading us through the jungle of alien plants to a small, cluttered clearing that served as his office. Books, actual, physical books made of paper, were stacked everywhere, alongside holographic projectors and strange, half-disassembled alien artifacts. "They believe the sword works on bioenergy," he said, picking up a fossilized skull and using it to point at the blade in my hand. "They are fools. The Valkor of old were not just engineers. They were poets. That blade is not a machine. It is a mirror. It does not run on an aura. It runs on intent, on will, on the raw, unrefined power of a sentient mind, focused on a single, desperate purpose. Something your modern, neural-linked, telepathically tranquil species has not had to exercise in millennia." He looked directly at me, his eyes sharp and analytical. "You humans, on the other hand, you have nothing but that. You clawed your way off your mudball planet with nothing more than sharp rocks and stubbornness. Your entire history is a testament to the power of will over circumstance. You are not a biological void, boy. You are a biological furnace. The sword did not awaken for a Valkor, because for 10,000 years, it has not met one who truly needed it. But you needed to open a door." Everything he said clicked into place. The rage, the desperation. It was not some magic power I had unlocked. I had simply wanted something, truly and completely, more than I had ever wanted anything in my life, and the sword had listened. "What do we do now?" Zira asked, her voice quiet. "Sarath will not stop. He will hunt us down." "Indeed," Kale said, leaning back in his chair. "A political solution is impossible. You cannot reason with dogma. Therefore, you must provide a practical demonstration. You must prove, in a way the Council cannot ignore, that the human and the sword are a legitimate combination. You must show them that your primitive methods have value. He tapped a few commands into a holographic console. A file appeared, floating in the air between us. The annual field practicum for advanced xenological survival is next week. A team of students is sent to the moon of Cygnus X1, a notoriously unstable environment, to retrieve geological samples. It is a high-risk, high-prestige assignment. We are fugitives, I pointed out. I do not think we can sign up for a field trip. I have taken the liberty of reassigning your student status, Kale said with a sly grin. Your confinement has been amended. You are now assigned to this practicum for special observation. Sarath will be furious, but he cannot object publicly without admitting he was trying to have you killed. He will have to let you go. Into a notoriously unstable environment? Zira asked, her eyes widening. He will simply arrange for another accident. Precisely, Kale clapped his hands together. And that is where you, Jax, will shine. You will be on a team with the best and brightest of the Academy. Students who rely on their sensors, their energy shields, and their psionic abilities. When their technology fails in the face of raw, unpredictable nature and at will, you will have to rely on this. He tapped his temple. And this. He pointed to my heart. And that. He nodded at the sword. You will save them, not with power, but with wit. And in doing so, you will make a statement that is louder than any political argument. It was an insane plan. It was a terrifying plan. It was probably going to get me killed. I will do it, I said, a new sense of purpose hardening my resolve. Zira looked at me, then at Kale's crazy, hopeful smile. She took a deep breath. The practicum requires teams of at least 2, she said firmly. I am going with him. Kale's smile widened. Excellent now. We have 1 week to teach a boy who grew up in a tin can how to survive on a death moon. This is going to be wonderfully educational. The moon of Cygnus X1 was not a place. It was a geological argument in progress. Jagged peaks of obsidian-laced rock clawed at a sky bruised purple and green by the radiation of the nearby black hole. The ground was a treacherous crust of metallic dust over a semi-molten core, and the thin, corrosive atmosphere screamed with winds that could strip paint from a starship's hull. It was, in short, a terrible place for a field trip. Our team consisted of 4 students, chosen for our supposed complementary skills. There was Zira, whose Valcor physiology gave her natural resilience. There was Teth, a Cathar insectoid, whose multi-lensed eyes were augmented with a full-spectrum sensor suite, allowing him to analyze the chemical composition of a rock by glancing at it. And there was Lyran, a Luminian, a being of pure light whose consciousness floated within a shimmering containment suit. His species possessed formidable psionic abilities, capable of sensing structural weaknesses and energy fluctuations from kilometers away. And then there was me, the human. My primary contribution to the team, as far as Teth and Lyran were concerned, was ballast. The human's organic systems are already showing signs of stress from the gravimetric distortions. Teth clicked. His mandibles twitching in a way that I was learning meant disapproval. His translator implant rendered his chirps as dry. Technical prose. His heart rate is elevated. His perspiration is excessive. His presence here is a logistical liability. I am fine, I grunted, shifting the weight of the supply pack on my shoulders. The gravity here was uneven, fluctuating with the black hole's pull, and my inner ear was having a full-blown argument with the laws of physics. Just enjoying the view, Lyran shimmered inside his suit, his form a swirling vortex of silver light. His voice was a telepathic whisper that entered your mind directly, smooth and cool. His emotional state is a chaotic torrent of anxiety and resentment. It is distracting. Please attempt to regulate your primitive endocrine system. Jax Hunter. Right, I muttered. Let me just find the off switch for my adrenal glands. Zira shot them both a glare. She had been mostly silent since we had landed, her demeanor tense and watchful. Her initial, horrified alliance with me had morphed into a strange sort of protective ownership. I was her mess to manage, and she would not tolerate anyone else making it worse. Teth, your sensors are for analyzing geology, not Jax's sweat. Lyran, if you find his thoughts distracting, then stop reading them. The mission was simple on paper: descend into the chasm of whispers, a deep, geologically active fissure, and retrieve a core sample of crystallized temporal fragments. It was a substance that, theoretically, should not exist. And Professor Kale believed it was the key to understanding non-linear energy states. He also believed it was the perfect final exam for his theory that technology was a crutch. The sword, the relic of origin, was strapped to my back. Its blue glow was hidden beneath a specially made scabbard, but I could feel its low hum through the fabric of my environment suit. It felt like a secret, a hidden piece of warmth against the biting cold of the moon. Archduke Sarath had been forced to approve my participation in the practicum, his hand forced by Kale's clever political maneuvering. I had seen him watching our shuttle depart, his face a mask of cold fury. He was letting me walk into this meat grinder with the full expectation that the moon would solve his human problem for him. As we began our descent into the chasm, the weirdness amplified. The metallic dust in the air played havoc with our communications, filling our ears with crackling static. Teth's advanced scanners started giving nonsensical readings, claiming the rocks were simultaneously 1,000 degrees and absolute zero. The magnetic fields are interfering with my instruments. He clicked in frustration, tapping a spindly claw against his helmet. The data is corrupt. I am sensing echoes, Lyran whispered in our minds, his light form flickering. The temporal nature of the crystals in these walls is fracturing my psionic perception. I sense the chasm as it was a century ago, and as it will be tomorrow, all at once. It is disorienting. Zira and I exchanged a look. Kale's prediction was coming true. The super-advanced students were being hobbled, their superior senses turning into liabilities. I, on the other hand, had only my own two eyes and a healthy sense of paranoia. And to me, the chasm just looked like a deep, dangerous hole in the ground. We should proceed with caution, I said. Keep an eye out for loose rocks. The walls look unstable. Teth let out a series of derisive clicks. Your rudimentary visual analysis is noted. Human. We had rappelled about 500 meters down when the moon decided it was tired of playing nice. It started with a low rumble, a vibration that shook the very atoms in our bones. The chasm walls groaned, and a shower of pebbles rained down on us. Seismic activity, Zira shouted over the rising noise. Secure your lines. But it was more than a simple tremor. A wave of shimmering energy, like a heat haze, swept down the chasm. The lights on our suits flickered and died, plunging us into absolute darkness. My helmet-mounted lamp, my suit's temperature regulator, the heads-up display, all of it went dead. EMP, Teth shrieked. A full-spectrum electromagnetic pulse. My systems are offline, I am blind. The echoes are screaming. Lyran's telepathic voice was a blast of pure panic in my head. The walls are falling! My climbing line jerked violently. I looked up and saw, in the terrifying split second before the darkness became total, a huge section of the chasm wall breaking away, a rock the size of a shuttlecraft, right above us. There was no time to think. There was only raw, desperate instinct. My hand shot to the hilt of the sword on my back. I drew it in a single, fluid motion. No. The word was not a shout, but a focused point of will, a defiant scream of my entire being against the crushing finality of the rock. The sword exploded with light, not the gentle blue glow, but the brilliant, fierce white of the time I had broken down my door, It was not a weapon. It was a statement. A statement that said, "I am here, and I will not be crushed." The light illuminated the chasm, revealing the horrifying descent of the massive boulder. But something else happened. A wave of force, invisible but potent, erupted from the blade. It was not a blast, but a precisely targeted push. It hit the falling rock, not with enough power to shatter it, but just enough to alter its trajectory. The massive slab of stone shifted its angle of descent by a few crucial degrees. Instead of crashing down directly on top of us, it slammed into the opposite wall of the chasm. The impact was deafening. The entire moon seemed to shudder. The rock shattered into a million pieces, creating an avalanche that poured into the depths below. We were whipped around on our lines, pelted by smaller debris, but the main, crushing force had missed us. Silence descended, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant rumble of the rockslide settling far below. The sword in my hand dimmed back to its steady, calming blue, its light the only illumination in the oppressive dark. "Report!" Zira's voice came, shaky but in control. "Is everyone functional?" "My suit is completely dead," Teth's translated voice chirped, filled with a new, uncharacteristic note of terror. "All systems are fried. I cannot see. I cannot analyze. I am helpless." "The psychic noise has receded," Lyran whispered, his voice weak. "But my suit's containment field is fluctuating. The EMP has destabilized it. If it fails, my form will dissipate." I looked at the sword. Its light was steady, casting long, dancing shadows on the chasm walls. It was the only piece of technology that was still working. Because I was beginning to realize it was not technology. "I am okay," I said, my voice hoarse. "And we have a light?" For the first time, Teth and Lyran were silent. There were no sarcastic clicks, no condescending whispers. There was only the light of the human's primitive blade, holding back the darkness. "Our rappelling gear is fried," Zira stated, her voice grim as she examined her equipment in the blue light. "The ascent motors are fused. We cannot go back up, and the rockslide has blocked the way down. We were trapped, half a kilometer down a fissure on a hostile moon, with no power, no communications, and no way out. Sareth was going to get his wish after all." "We are going to die here," Teth stated, a flat declaration of fact. "No, we are not," I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me. The initial terror was gone, replaced by a cold, clear focus. This was no different from 100 simulations I had run back on Earth, stripped of their tech. My teammates were just scared people in the dark. But I had grown up with limitations. Improvisation was a human superpower. "Nix, are you still with me?" I subvocalized. My personal AI was shielded inside my head, independent of the suit. "I am operational," her calm voice replied. "The EMP did not affect my core functions. However, all of your suit's external sensors are offline. I am as blind as you are." "Not completely," I said. I held up the sword. "We have light, and we have our brains. Let us start with what we know. We cannot go up, and we cannot go down, so we have to go sideways." I used the sword's light to scan the walls. Teth and Lyran, who had once looked at me with such disdain, now followed the movement of the light with desperate attention. The rock here was different, streaked with veins of a dark, crystalline material. "There," Zira said, pointing. "That looks like a lava tube. An old one. See how the rock is smoother?" She was right. It was a dark, circular opening in the wall, about 10 meters to our left. It was our only hope. Getting to it was the first problem. Our gear was dead. We had to swing across the chasm on our useless ropes. It required timing, coordination, and trust. I found myself directing the operation, talking them through it, my voice steady. "Zira, you are the strongest. You swing first and secure a new anchor. Teth, you are the lightest. We will need to help you. Lyran, focus. Keep your containment field stable. One by one, we swung across the terrifying void. The blue light of my sword, the only thing illuminating our precarious handholds. I went last, and as I dangled over the abyss, I felt a new connection to the blade. It was not just a tool. It felt like a partner. Its light was a reflection of my own will to survive, to get my team out of this alive. The lava tube was a claustrophobic tunnel of volcanic rock. We followed it for what felt like hours. The sword's light, our only guide, Teth, stripped of his sensors, was disoriented and frightened. Lyran's form flickered alarmingly with every step. Zira was a rock, her training and discipline keeping her focused. But I could see the strain in her eyes. The mission is a failure, Teth clicked mournfully. We will never retrieve the samples. The mission is to survive, I countered. We will worry about the extra credit later. The tube eventually opened into a vast cavern. In the center, bathing the entire space in a soft, pulsating light, were the crystals. They were breathtaking, huge crystalline structures that seemed to hum with a strange energy, casting rainbows that danced on the cavern walls. We had found our objective, but we were still trapped. The energy emanating from these crystals is immense, Lyran whispered, his form seeming to stabilize in their glow. It is what caused the EMP. The entire cavern is saturated with temporal radiation. That was when I noticed the sound, a faint, rhythmic dripping. I followed the sound to the far side of the cavern. Water, or some other clear liquid, was seeping through a crack in the rock and trickling down into a small pool. But the strange thing was, the drips were falling upwards. Droplets would collect on a stalactite, then fall towards the ceiling, where they vanished. "What is that?" Zira asked, coming up behind me. I dipped my gloved finger in the pool. The liquid was cold. "Nix, any ideas?" "Without sensors, I can only theorize," she replied. "Given the temporal properties of this cavern, it is possible you are observing a localized gravitational anomaly, or, more likely, a pocket of space where time is flowing in reverse. Reverse time, dripping up. The idea was insane, but in this place, it almost made sense. An idea, a crazy, human idea, began to form in my mind. The rock slide blocked our way down, I said, thinking aloud. But what if the rock slide has not happened yet? From another perspective. Zira stared at me. That makes no sense. Probably not, I admitted. But look. I pointed the sword at the ceiling, high above the crystal formation. There was another opening, a shaft that went straight up. That has to lead somewhere. If the water is falling up, maybe other things will too. It was a long shot, a theory based on a visual paradox and a whole lot of hope. But it was the only shot we had. "How do we get up there?" Teth asked, his voice devoid of its usual arrogance. That was the problem. The ceiling was 100 meters up. We had no working equipment. But we had the sword, and I had my anger. I walked to the center of the cavern and stood before the largest crystal. I remembered the rage I felt in my cell, the desperate will to survive that had shattered the containment field. I needed that again. I thought of Sarath, of his smug certainty that I would die here. I thought of my teammates, their lives now depending on the primitive human they had mocked. I let the anger and the determination build inside me, a hot, burning fire. I focused it all, every last drop, into the sword. I did not swing. I thrusted, a single, sharp, forward jab at the base of the massive crystal. The sword unleashed its power, a concentrated kinetic shockwave, tight and focused, slammed into the crystal. It did not shatter. A single, perfect crack appeared, and a slab of crystal, about the size of a small platform, sheared off and fell to the cavern floor with a resounding crash. "Now what?" Zira asked, shielding her eyes from the dust. Now we ride, I said. I jumped onto the slab of crystal. Everybody on... They looked at me as if I were insane, but the fear in their eyes was greater than their doubt. Zira climbed on, then helped pull a trembling Teth aboard. Lyran floated on last, his form flickering nervously. Ride where Teth clicked. It is a rock. It is a rock in a place where water falls up, I said, planting my feet firmly. I looked at the dark shaft high above us. Okay, Blade, I whispered. One more time. Take us home. I focused again, but this time, it was not anger. It was a plea, a focused, sustained desire. Up. I poured the very concept of up into the sword. I imagined us rising, floating, escaping. The sword responded. The blue light intensified, but no shockwave came. Instead, the slab of crystal we were standing on began to hum. It vibrated, and then, slowly, miraculously, it began to lift off the ground. A localized anti-gravity field, generated by the temporal energy of the crystal, amplified and directed by the will I was channeling through the sword. We floated upwards, a makeshift elevator powered by sheer stubbornness. We rose through the cavern, past the smaller crystals, towards the dark opening in the ceiling. Teth was clinging to the surface, his mandibles chattering. Lyran's light was a steady, awestruck glow. Zira stood beside me, her hand gripping my arm, her silver eyes fixed on my face, full of a wonder that had completely replaced her earlier disdain. We emerged onto the surface of the moon, not far from our lander, just as the twin suns of the Cygnus system were beginning to rise. We had survived. We had the samples. And we had done it with no technology, no sensors, and no psionics. We had done it with a glowing sword and a desperate, crazy plan. The return flight to the academy was quiet. Teth did not say a word, but he kept looking at me, his multi-lensed eyes filled with a new, hesitant respect. Lyran's telepathic voice, when it finally came, was soft. Your mind is very bright. Jax Hunter. Not chaotic, just determined. When we landed, Professor Kale was there to meet us. He took one look at our battered team, at the slab of impossible crystal we had brought back with us, and at the sword, now resting peacefully in its scabbard on my back. A huge, triumphant grin spread across his face. Well, he said, his eyes twinkling, it looks like class is dismissed. The story of how the primitive humans saved the elite practicum team with nothing but a glowing sword and a maverick theory on localized temporal buoyancy spread through the academy before we had even made it to the medical bay. I was no longer a joke or an anomaly. I was something new, something dangerous to the old way of thinking. I was the rascally human who got things done. And as Zira and I walked away from the landing pad, she bumped her shoulder against mine. That was the most illogical, reckless, and brilliant thing I have ever witnessed, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. We call it making it up as you go along, I replied. It is a human specialty. Perhaps it is a specialty the rest of the galaxy could learn from, she said. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Archduke Serath would not see it that way. I had not just survived his trap. I had thrived in it. I had turned his execution order into a legend, and a man like him would never, ever forgive that. The battle for the sword was far from over. It had only just begun. The roar of the sword's final, explosive pulse was replaced by a ringing silence, punctuated by the groan of stressed metal and the distant, hysterical wail of the Academy's emergency systems. The Grand Convocation Hall was a disaster zone. Dust and vaporized particles of the security drones hung in the air like a thick fog, catching the last, defiant rays of the Aurelian Nebula filtering through the fractured canopy above. My arm ached. A deep, thrumming pain that felt less like an injury and more like an electrical overload. The sword in my hand had dimmed, its furious white light receding back to the familiar, gentle blue. But it felt heavier now, burdened by the terrible power I had just unleashed. I stood there, panting, my legs trembling from adrenaline. My mind was a blank slate. I had just faced down a squad of elite Academy security, their advanced weaponry and tactical programming rendered utterly useless. I had not outfought them. I had not outthought them. I had simply outwanted them. I wanted to live more than they wanted to follow their orders. And the sword had translated that raw, desperate desire into overwhelming force. The surviving security guards, a mix of Goliaths and other formidable species, were picking themselves up from the debris. They were not raising their weapons. They were staring at me, their professional discipline shattered, replaced by a primal fear. They had been trained to fight energy fields, kinetic weapons, psionic attacks. They had no protocol for fighting a feeling. Jax. Zira's voice cut through my daze. She was running towards me, her usual graceful glide replaced by a frantic, undignified sprint. She skidded to a halt in front of me, her silver eyes wide as she took in the scene. She looked at the smoldering remains of the drones, at the terrified guards, and finally at me, her gaze lingering on the glowing blade in my hand. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "I do not think so," I said, my own voice sounding distant and raspy. "I think I just voided the warranty on the Academy." The ground shook again, a deep, resonant tremor that was not an attack, but a symptom of a deeper malaise. The living crystal arches above us flickered, their internal light sputtering like dying candles. The whole station felt sick. "What is happening?" I asked. "It was you," she breathed, a look of dawning comprehension on her face. "The power you released from the sword. It was not a clean energy discharge. It was chaotic, emotional. It propagated through the Academy's core energy grid like a virus. The station's systems are based on pure, logical energy states. They cannot process this." She gestured at the sword, at me. We were the disease. My very human messiness was crashing the galaxy's most advanced operating system. Before I could formulate a sarcastic response, a section of the far wall exploded inwards. Archduke Sereth strode through the smoke and debris, flanked by two towering Valkor guards in ceremonial armor. He was no longer the calm, contemptuous politician. His elegant robes were torn, his face was etched with a furious snarl, and in his hand, he held a black, rod-like weapon that hummed with a malevolent, purple energy. The pure, unadulterated hatred in his silver eyes was terrifying. "Blasphemer!" he roared, his voice amplified by rage. "You have corrupted our most sacred treasure. You have infected this holy place with your primitive filth. You will not leave this hall alive." He raised the weapon. I raised the sword, my exhausted muscles screaming in protest. But I knew, with a sinking certainty, that I did not have another blast like the last one in me. I was running on empty. "Serath, stop!" Zira shouted, stepping between us. "You do not understand what you are doing. The fault is not his, it is yours." The Archduke laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "My fault. I am trying to cleanse a stain from our history. Step aside, Zira, or you will share the primate's fate." "You speak of history." Zira's voice rang out, clear and strong, filled with a conviction I had never heard from her before. "But you have spent your life trying to erase it. I have been in the archives. Archduke, I have read the old texts, the ones you tried to have sealed, the ones that tell the true story of the last hero, Kalar, and the day the sword went dark." Sereth froze, the weapon wavering slightly in his hand, a flicker of something not fear, but a cold, ancient anger passed through his eyes. "The official histories say Kalar fell in battle against the Void Swarm. His energy finally spent," Zira continued, her voice echoing in the ruined hall. But that is a lie. The battle was already won. The sword went dark in the aftermath. It went dark in your presence. Serath. The texts speak of a betrayal of spirit. You were his second in command. You coveted his position, his fame, his connection to the relic. You could not defeat him in combat. So you defeated him with words. You poisoned his victory, twisted his success into a failure, and filled him with doubt and despair. You did not kill his body. You killed his will. A collective gasp went through the assembled guards and students who were watching from the edges of the hall. The air grew thick with unspoken horror. You broke his spirit, Serath. Zira's voice dropped to a pained whisper. And when his conviction faltered, the blade, which feeds on that conviction, died in his hands. It has been dormant for 10,000 years, not because it was waiting for a worthy successor, but because its last wielder was betrayed by one of his own. You are the reason it went dark. Every piece of the puzzle clicked into place in my mind. The sword was not just a mirror of my will. It was a mirror of any strong will. And it had been starved for a millennium. Serath's face contorted into a mask of pure fury. Lies, the ramblings of a senile historian twisted by a delusional girl. I will silence your heresy myself. He lunged forward, not at Zira, but at me. He was unnaturally fast, a blur of motion. I brought the sword up to block, but I was too slow, too tired. The black rod in his hand slammed against the flat of my blade. The impact did not throw me back. It felt like my very soul was being electrocuted. The purple energy from his weapon was a nullifying force, an energy of pure despair and negation. It was the antithesis of the sword's power. The blue light of the blade flickered violently, the hum turning into a pained scream. I felt my own will, my own anger and determination, being drained away, consumed by the weapon's nihilistic energy. My strength vanished. My knees buckled. You see, human, Serath hissed, pressing his advantage, forcing me to the ground. Your emotional outbursts are no match for true, focused power, the power to unmake, the power of absolute zero. The sword was growing dim, the blue light fading to a pale flicker. I was losing. The connection was failing. Despair, cold and absolute, began to creep into the edges of my mind. He was right. I was just a human. This was all a mistake. Jax, no. Zira's voice. Through the haze of pain and draining hope, I saw her. She ran to my side, and without hesitation, she placed her hand over mine on the hilt of the dying sword. The moment her skin touched mine, everything changed. It was not a jolt of energy. It was a flood of understanding. Her thoughts, her feelings, her entire existence poured into my mind. I felt her shame over the initial prank. I felt her dawning confusion, her reluctant admiration, her terror when she thought I was being assassinated, and her fierce, defiant loyalty now. It was a torrent of emotion, but it was not chaotic. It was a perfect harmony to my own turbulent feelings. Her conviction joined with mine. Her will became my will. And the sword drank it in. It did not just reignite. It was reborn. The physical blade of metal dissolved in my hand. It simply ceased to be in its place. A construct of pure, incandescent energy erupted. No longer just blue or white, but a swirling vortex of 1,000 impossible colors. It was not a solid blade, but a coherent field of light that sang with a powerful, harmonic note. It was beautiful and terrifying, and it felt like holding the heart of a newborn star. The link between Zira and me intensified. It was not just thoughts. I could feel her heartbeat as if it were my own. I could feel the strange, ancient rhythm of her Valkor physiology, and she could feel the frantic, stubborn pulse of my human heart. We were two different species, two different minds,
united by a single purpose, channeled through a weapon that was no longer a relic, but a living bond between us.
Sarath stumbled back, his eyes wide with disbelief and terror. "What is this? This is not possible."
"You were wrong, Sarath," a new voice said. It was my voice and Zira's, speaking in perfect, unnerving unison, a fusion of human grit and Valkor melody. The sword was not made for one will. It was made for unity. We rose to our feet as one. The new, ethereal blade of light hummed, effortlessly deflecting the purple energy of Sarath's weapon. The power of despair could not touch the power of two souls fighting together. "You broke one spirit and silenced the blade for millennia," our combined voice declared. "But you cannot break two." We advanced. Sarath, for the first time in his long, arrogant life, knew true fear. He fired a desperate, full-power blast from his weapon. We did not block it. We simply met it with the light of our own. The purple energy of negation struck the rainbow-hued energy of creation and was consumed. The light from our blade flowed down the beam, overwhelming Sarath's weapon. It exploded in his hand with a flash of purple light, throwing him violently backward. He crashed against a pillar and slumped to the ground, defeated, his reign of bitterness and betrayal finally over. But the power we had unleashed could not be contained. The blade of pure energy in our hands pulsed, and a wave of harmonic resonance washed out from us. It was not destructive like before. It was communicative. It swept through the academy, not as a virus, but as a new truth. The station's core systems, built on rigid logic, tried to process the paradox of our united consciousness, and they failed. The groaning of the station intensified. The crystal arches did not just flicker now, they shattered, raining down harmlessly as showers of light. The floating platforms of the council began to drift aimlessly, their positional thrusters failing. The great transparent canopy overhead cracked and dissolved, revealing the raw, unfiltered beauty of the nebula. The very structure of the academy, the physical embodiment of the old order, was coming apart at the seams. It was not exploding. It was simply letting go. The system was not crashing. It was collapsing under the weight of a new idea it could not comprehend. The light of the sword finally subsided, and the construct receded, leaving nothing in my hand but the faint, tingling memory of its power. The link between my mind and Zira's faded, leaving a strange sense of echo and a profound feeling of loss. I looked at her. Her silver eyes were shimmering with unshed tears. She understood. We had not just won a fight. We had broken a world. We stood together in the heart of the ruined hall, surrounded by the gentle, silent collapse of a galactic institution. The alarms had stopped. The shouting had ceased. All that remained was the quiet hum of a new, uncertain future. Sarath was unconscious, his power broken. The academy was crippled, its authority shattered, and we were just two students, a human and a Valkor, standing in the rubble, completely and utterly alone. The quiet that followed the collapse was more profound than any sound. It was the sound of a paradigm shattering. We stood in the ruins of the Grand Convocation Hall, Jax and Zira, a human and a Valkor, breathing the dust of a fallen age. The emergency systems, those that still functioned, bathed the wreckage in a soft, pulsating amber light, a silent, automated heartbeat in a body that was clinically dead. The academy was not destroyed, but its soul, its unshakable certainty in its own superiority, had been hollowed out. Slowly, figures began to emerge from the shadowed alcoves and corridors, students and faculty, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. No one approached us. We were the epicenter, the cause of this grand, terrifying change. We were taboo. Then, a familiar figure ambled through the dust,
picking his way through the debris with the unconcerned air of a botanist on a nature walk. Professor Kale, his wild white hair looking even more chaotic than usual, stopped a few feet from us. He was not looking at the destruction. He was looking at us, and his eyes, for the first time, were not filled with manic energy, but with a deep, soul-shaking reverence. "In all my years," he said, his voice a soft, raspy whisper, "I have theorized. I have lectured. I have written papers that my colleagues called the work of a madman." He smiled, a slow, wonderful expression. "But I never truly expected to see it. Creation, the energy of two disparate souls weaving a new reality. It was beautiful." He was the first one to cross the invisible line, the first to treat us not as weapons or anomalies, but as the architects of whatever came next. His acceptance was the first stone laid in the foundation of a new world. The weeks that followed were a blur of organized chaos. The Galactic Alliance, shocked out of its complacency, sent emergency administrators and engineers. The old Academy Council was formally dissolved, its members either resigning in disgrace or, in Archduke Sereth's case, being taken into custody by the Valkor authorities to answer for his crimes of historical falsification and attempted murder. The narrative Zira had unveiled in the hall, backed by the recovered archival data, had sent shockwaves through her people. The legend of their greatest hero was not just a lie, it was a tragedy of their own making. A provisional council was formed to oversee the Academy's reconstruction. It was a motley collection of beings, including the inquisitive liquid entity from the old council, and, to everyone's astonishment, Professor Kale, who was dragged kicking and screaming into a position of administrative authority. His first and only demand was that Zira and I were to be left alone, given new quarters, and treated not as prisoners or pariahs, but as consultants. My life became strange. I was no longer just a student. Beings who had once dismissed me as a primitive now sought me out. Their questions a hesitant mix of scientific curiosity and philosophical dread. They wanted to understand what I had done. I did not have an answer for them. How do you explain the feeling of sheer, bloody-minded desperation? How do you quantify the power of not wanting to die? Zira and I spent most of our time together. The intense psychic bond we had shared was gone, but an echo remained, a quiet understanding that needed no words. We would sit for hours in the observation deck, watching the maintenance drones painstakingly repair the great canopy. Our silence more comfortable than any conversation I had ever had. The memory of her thoughts, her fears, her strength was now a part of me, and my frantic, chaotic humanity was a part of her. We were a two-person species. One evening, a message chimed on my personal datapad, a summons from Professor Kale, not to a sterile council chamber, but to his biodome, his personal jungle of cosmic weirdness. We found him in his cluttered office, hunched over a holographic display that showed a swirling, complex energy pattern. It was a recording of the moment the sword had been reborn in my hand. Ferdinand, the multi-legged furball, was asleep on a stack of ancient books nearby. Come in, Kale said, not looking up from the display. "I believe I have solved the final piece of the puzzle, the one that has been bothering me since the beginning." "What puzzle is that?" Professor Zira asked, her voice soft. "The origin," he said, finally turning to face us. He looked at the sword, which I now wore in a simple scabbard at my side. After the battle, the blade had solidified back into its metal form, but it was changed. The gunmetal gray was now shot through with iridescent, light-refracting lines, as if the memory of its energy form was trapped within the steel. "The relic of origin," he mused. "The Valkor were right about the name, but wrong about the origin." He gestured to the holographic model. "When you two joined your wills, the sword did not just reignite, it rebooted. It reverted to its base programming, its core operating system, and for a few glorious seconds, it broadcast its maker's signature. I have spent weeks cross-referencing that signature against every known metallurgical and energy-weaving art in the Galactic database. He paused, a dramatic flair that he clearly enjoyed. It is not Valkor. It is not Cathar or Luminian. There is no trace of any known Alliance technology in its design. Then what is it? I asked. Kale's eyes sparkled. It is human. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Ferdinand seemed to twitch in his sleep.
That is impossible, Zero whispered. Humanity is a young species. You have only had interstellar travel for a few centuries. The blade is over 10,000 years old.
Precisely, Kale beamed. You are thinking of your humanity, modern humanity. I am talking about the humanity that came before. Old Earth, the pre-diaspora civilization that vanished from your historical records. There are legends, dismissed as myth, of a time when humanity did not just travel the stars, but commanded them. A time before they were forced to retreat back to their homeworld. Their great works lost to time. He brought up another image, a fragment of an ancient text, the script so old it was barely translatable. The Valkor did not forge this blade. They found it, drifting in a dead system, the sole remnant of a forgotten battle. It was dark, inert. They could not activate it, but they recognized its power. So they did what so many proud civilizations do. They created a story. They reverse-engineered a mythology for it, naming it for the first of their heroes, Kalar, who had just enough conviction to make it faintly hum. They built their most sacred legend around a piece of technology they did not understand. I stared at the sword at my hip. My sword, humanity's sword, a relic from a lost age of my own people, a birthright I never knew existed. I had not awakened an alien artifact. I had answered a call from home, a call that had been echoing through the void for 10 millennia, waiting for a human hand, a human heart, a human will, to finally pick it up. The irony is exquisite, Kale chuckled. The entire galactic standard for measuring a species' worth was based on a misunderstanding of a piece of lost human technology. It would seem, my dear Jax, that your people were not late to the party. You were the ones who threw it, and just forgot to tell anyone. The Provisional Council meeting felt different this time. I was not a defendant. I was a revelation. Kyle presented his findings, his voice ringing with the triumphant conviction of a man who had been proven right after a lifetime of being called crazy. The council members were silent, their expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to profound, system-shattering enlightenment. The foundation of their society, the very metric of their hierarchy, had been a lie. The liquid being, now the acting chancellor of the rebuilt academy, turned its full attention to me. Your species, Jax Hunter, its translated voice bubbled, is not what we believed it to be. Your will, this emotional, chaotic force, it is not a primitive impulse. It is a form of energy we have failed to comprehend. And this academy was founded on the principle of comprehending all things. We must learn. What do you want from me? I asked. We want you to teach, the Chancellor replied. The practicum on Cygnus X1 has become legendary. Your methods were unorthodox, dangerous, and completely successful. The old ways of learning are insufficient. We need a new curriculum, one that teaches not just logic and science, but ingenuity, resilience, and conviction. We would like you to be the Academy's first professor of applied human ingenuity. I stared at him. A professor. Me. The kid from the orbital rust bucket. The idea was so absurd, so utterly ridiculous, that I started to laugh. A real, genuine laugh that echoed in the formal council chamber. What would I even call the first class? I chuckled, shaking my head. A Beginner's Guide to Flying on a Rock, Existential Crisis Management 101. I thought about my entire journey. The condescension, the assassination attempt, the hopeless battle. The one constant had been my stubborn refusal to accept the fate that had been written for me by others. "I have got it," I said, a wide grin spreading across my face. "The first course I will teach is called How to Punch Destiny in the Face." The Chancellor's liquid form swirled in what I could only interpret as amusement. "An unorthodox title," it bubbled. "We will have it added to the registry immediately." Professor Hunter. The suns of the Aurelian system cast long shadows across the newly rebuilt plaza. The academy was open again, its crystal arches gleaming, its halls filled with a new, more tentative energy. The old arrogance was gone, replaced by a cautious curiosity. My first lecture was scheduled for the next day, and I still had no idea what I was going to say. Zira found me by the railing of the observation deck, looking out at the endless swirl of the nebula. "Professor Hunter," she said, a playful smile on her face. "It has a nice ring to it." "It sounds like a joke," I replied, smiling back at her. "Most of the best things do," she said. She stood beside me, her shoulder just brushing against mine. The easy familiarity between us was the most precious thing I had gained through all of this. We were quiet for a moment, watching the starlight. "Do you remember that first day?" she asked softly. "In the convocation hall, when I gave you the sword?" "Vaguely," I said, my voice thick with sarcasm. "It did not really leave an impression." She laughed. A real, audible sound this time, not the shimmering light of her people. It was a sound I had taught her. "It was meant to be a joke," she said, her voice turning serious. "A cruel one. I wanted to show you how small you were, how powerless." I turned to look at her beautiful obsidian face, and her silver eyes that now held not pity, but a deep and abiding respect. I thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the fight, the impossible victories, the shared thoughts, the shattering of one world, and the beginning of another. I grinned. "Yeah," I said, my voice full of a warmth and pride I had never known before. "Joke's on the galaxy now." Later that night, we took a small shuttle out into the silent space beyond the academy. We did not speak. We did not need to. In my hands, I held the sword. It hummed softly, a song of homecoming. It was a weapon. It was a key. It was humanity's legacy. But it was too much for one man to carry. Its story did not belong to me anymore. It belonged to everyone. I looked at Zira. She nodded, understanding what I was about to do. Together, we held the sword and raised it high. We did not push or will it. We simply let go. We released our claim, our possession, our history. We gave it back to the universe. The sword dissolved, not into nothing, but into everything. It became a beacon of pure, living light, a miniature star of swirling, impossible colors. It pulsed with the steady, stubborn rhythm of a human heart, and with the graceful, ancient melody of a Valkor soul. It took up a stationary orbit, a new, man-made star watching over the Galactic Academy. It was no longer a relic of the past, but a promise for the future, a symbol of a forgotten legacy, reclaimed, a testament to the idea that the greatest power in the universe was not the energy in your cells, but the conviction in your soul. And as it shone in the endless dark, a single, brilliant point of light against the majesty of the cosmos, it was the most beautiful, most defiant, and most human thing I had ever seen.